our take on all things happening from the perspective of two parents of BIPOC transgender kids.
We have so much to get into, especially since we were able to record last week, and we have a super special guest on our show today.
Stephen, I cannot tell you how excited I am to talk about everything that's happened since we last met and to talk to Christoph and Hazel Heinzer.
Dude, what are we waiting for? Welcome everyone once again to the Parent Advocate Podcast. Let's get started.
Let's do this.
All right, Lizette, I need the deets. These past 2 weeks have been absolutely batshit crazy. I need to get caught up.
Stephen, I'm so tired. I need to catch up on sleep. No, but things have been good. So as you know, you and I participated in the Gender Liberation March, months of trying to get the word out, promoting the event, and everyone behind putting this incredible march and day together worked so hard. And so let's thank the Gender Liberation Host Committee for having us there and it being such an incredible day. Stephen, my life has been crazy. Our little puppy Sonic passed away. That was sad. I don't know. It's felt like such a blur. And in 3 weeks, we traveled to San Antonio to participate in the Familia Trans Queer Liberation 10-year encuentro. So that's kind of exciting. Stephen, on a personal note, I had to go to a brunch today. It was my old friend group, but it was a mix of friends who I don't talk to anymore. And when I tell you that, I don't know, it brought up all those weird old feelings of I'm sure that there were more reasons about why we all decided not to be friends with each other, but it happened, and I was telling Jose this, it happened in the time when Daniel was beginning to social transition. And so even if they don't see the demise of our friendship being due to my child's gender identity, I see it as that because I was there for them through divorces and college and drama, and I was there for them all the time. And to have to spend time with them just takes me back to a place of frustration and disappointment and anger, I think.
Let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
Why then did you agree? Were you not concerned that those emotions were going to pop up or crop up in the midst of it? Because I can tell you right now, anybody that dropped off after my child identified who they were and let everybody else know, and I let you know, and you suddenly stop fucking with me, and you see what I'm going through in this damn state with going to the Capitol. If you see my life, because you on Facebook, and I knew you on Facebook, and you act like it's all hunky-dory when you see me and don't have a mea culpa, I'm not fucking with you. I'm getting up and leaving. I probably wouldn't go in the first place. I'm just
so we sat at different corners, and it's interesting because I on a normal day-to-day, I don't have anything to do. I don't talk to them, but because we have those mutual friends that they've stayed friends with, I can't be no, that bitch is gonna be there, so I don't want to be there. And I don't know, it's just such an awkward thing, right? Because there's all this history and then also an inability. It's interesting to watch them ask everyone else how they're doing except for me. And this week has been, the last 3 weeks have been big weeks because we've had all the ACLU campaign stuff come out, and then the HRC PSA film came out. And so it's not like they don't see what I'm up to, right? It's fascinating, the dynamics of that.
I couldn't be the one. I'm going to tell you right now, and it's not that I'm petty, but I'm just what am I doing? If I'm going to sit in a space where you ask 7 people and I'm the 8th one about how they're doing and you don't ask me, I'm sorry, I shan't abide by that kind of fuckery. I really can't. I can't. And I would call your ass out, be like, bitch, really? And again,
I did that. I do that. I've done that before. And then everyone gangs up. But it's just such an interesting thing. I mean, I don't know if you feel this with I don't know. It's just, it feels awkward when it feels like it's your child. Do you know what I mean? And they may not see it that way. They may be like, at least that was being a bitch, so we stopped talking to her. Right? But it's just such a crazy, I don't think that anybody else has that. I'm sure other parents can empathize that it feels wow, we would still be friends if I didn't have a queer child.
Right.
That made it awkward, right?
Yes. Right.
So it's just such a weird, interesting dynamic. And it kind of puts, I don't know, it made me feel in a funk. And I had told myself I wasn't going to go to these events anymore, but because it was my friend's birthday and our other friend's cancer remission celebration, I can't not go to the cancer remission celebration.
Listen, you're right. Again, and I'm just emoting. I'm just Luthering.
I know, you're backing me up.
Because that's that bullshit. And it's interesting the ways in which we accommodate other people who haven't accommodated us in major ways. Like I would never dip out on one of my peoples who are going through something with their child. Like I wouldn't just
Yeah.
bounce because it was uncomfortable for me. Like that is when you step up if you're a true friend. And so when people expose themselves to not be true friends, I take the check, I make a note, and I keep it moving. Like I'm not gonna, like you haven't been, I'm not gonna intentionally put myself in the cut with these people because they don't deserve me. But
Yeah.
you know, like you said, it was the birthday, it was a remission, so you had to be there. But yeah, I'd have been like, she'd have caught one, she'd have been faded because I wouldn't have been playing nice. Like you played nice, good for you.
I
You
was
were
so
bigger than
nice. I
you were
just
bigger than
quietly sat in the corner.
well, yeah, still, you're bigger than I am because I'd have been like, bitch, for real? This is what we doing? Okay, I see you.
It's been so long, but yeah, no, it was so awkward. It really put me in a funk today. All right. I hope the other parent hearing this like can empathize because it's so fucking awkward, even with like family and stuff. So just know y'all are not alone when these like holidays and events happen. All right, Stephen, tell me about you. What's going on?
So, of course, we were both at the Gender Liberation March, and it was a movie. The kids say it was a movie. It was a movie. It was epic. It was everything that I thought it was going to be and more. Big ups to the organizers because it was so really well done. The fact that we were able to be in community with Miss Major, I was just like over the moon. And I'm still like just now coming down to earth. It's been a whirlwind, like you said. It's been a whirlwind. I had the Garden State Equality had a community day in Camden with like Be Inc. and Hope Works and Urban Promise and all these organizations and all these families showed up. We said it's been a lot. And I don't even think I've told you this. Well, I have told you this, but I don't think I've told you, our listeners, this. I have been working with a parental support group in Asbury Park. They have a men's group, a dad's group, and we've had a bunch of meetings. And because we've had a bunch of meetings, I've had the opportunity to get to know like the intimate circumstances of many men's lives in New Jersey. And a lot of dads are going through it. A lot of dads in New Jersey, a blue state, a safe state, people are going through the bullshit. And so I've been happy that I've been able to be a resource for these fathers who are just fresh to the game. You know what I'm saying? And are getting faded by their spouses, by their schools, by other kids in the community. Like they're really catching wreck and they're just like, what do I do? And so I can see why you be tired listening to all the trauma that cats are experiencing because they have gender expansive kid. It's a lot, but I'm built for it. You know this. And so I'm happy to be a resource. And of course, I'm going to be like leaning heavily on you because you've been in this space far longer than I.
I know. I told Jose when you texted me yesterday and was like, we said you have time to chat, that I called you and I said, welcome to the work. Because I literally just got done with like a 2-hour coffee with a parent earlier. So, like, I totally get it. You are built for it. And you just got to make sure you build in that self care because, like, that energy stick, you're going to have to sage, take some sea salt bath,
Now,
make sure you're protecting your peace.
therapist and my coach on speed dial. Trust
That's
and believe. But Lisette, we could go on and on and on. And in fact, I think we're going to have to just start having these regular rap sessions about what's happening in the work. You know what I'm saying? We're just going to call this section the work. And we're just going to rap
right.
about like how we're the support we're giving to parents around us. But we got to get to today's topics.
Let's do it.
So the New Hampshire School Board defied state law in support of a 16-year-old trans soccer player. Now, after a federal judge ruled that a transgender teenager in New Hampshire should be allowed to return to her school's soccer team for the fall, while litigation against the state's trans sports ban played out, another school district has allowed a trans athlete to play on her own soccer team. On Tuesday, New Hampshire Public Radio, which is like the NPR affiliate, reported that Maëla Jacques had successfully appealed to her school board to be permitted to play on the girls' soccer team. Jacques, who is a junior, has been playing goalie on the girls' varsity soccer team at Kearsarge Regional High School in North Sutton, New Hampshire since last fall. Now, the Kearsarge Regional School Board voted 6-1 to allow Maëlle and other trans girls to play on sports teams on August 29th. In its decision, the board cited Title IX and a state law that prevents discrimination in public education.
Stephen, I forgot to tell you that Rachel Berg, one of the lawyers with NCLR, notified us that we won our sports sports case. Now, it's not mine and Daniel's, but it belongs to some of the families in two of our parent communities here in Arizona. And while the ruling is directed strictly to the young trans girls and their families who filed suit, they won. And so this is beautiful. We're seeing that trans kids deserve to play on their sports teams. We're seeing it and have been seeing it across the country. And now we just need these bigoted Republican assholes who keep trying to ban young kids from participating alongside their peers in sports to stop harassing them.
That part.
All right, Stephen. So Texas got more than what they bargained for after setting up an inbox to monitor gender marker change requests. After Texas set up an email inbox for keeping track of residents who make requests to change the sex on their driver's licenses, trolls spammed the email the way that only veterans of Tumblr trenches could, with the entirety of the script of the B movie. The Texas newsroom reported that there were more than 700 pages of emails, with only one noting a request to change gender marker. Most of the rest were spam, ranging from newsletters from the gay porn blog Queer Me Now and sex toy company Love Honey to multiple copies of the B movie script. The other emails contained complaints about the new policy change, including one that described it as evil and weird and calling the person monitoring the agency email a good little Nazi and a disgrace in the eyes of God.
I don't know why these fools continue to engage in the tomfoolery. It's like they're really trying to get citizen reporting like the Nazis of other people and the surgeries and the requests and all the things. It's like, why are you having people rat out one another? What kind of society, what kind of dystopian society are you trying to create? So I'm so happy that whenever they do these stupid, short-sighted, simple things, they get spammed the way they do. That's what they get. And I'm glad somebody had to go through all that bullshit to realize, this wasn't a good fucking idea, and I wasn't. Anywho, you know there's more idiots like this in the world, right? Anti-LGBTQ plus GOP candidate Mark Robinson expressed an affinity for trans porn, among other disturbing revelations. Like, I can't with these people. You know Mark Robinson, the controversial and socially conservative Republican nominee for governor of North Carolina, a Black man, I'm embarrassed to say, who made a series of inflammatory comments on a pornography website's message board more than a decade ago, according to a CNN K-file investigation. The report, published Thursday, after crazy speculation among the political press about its contest, tied an account with the username Mini Soldier on the adult website Nude Africa to Robinson, demonstrating that he used the same alias across multiple social media platforms, despite his protestations and denials. In comments he posted between 2008 and 2012, he allegedly announced himself as, and I quote, a Black Nazi, and wrote that slavery is not bad and that he might even buy a couple of them. Many of his posts included use of racial, anti-LGBTQ plus, and anti-Semitic slurs. What a piece of work.
Stephen, I can't. Like, I really can't. Like, it made my brain explode. The hatred that comes out of people online is wild. All I heard when I was listening to the news was, did you ever watch Superbad? Remember when, I forget his name, says, people don't forget. It's Superbad, right? Where he's like, people don't forget. This is all I think about. Chat forums do not let people forget. And so he can deny all he wants, but he wrote it online, and online lasts forever. And so what is going on that they believe that they can say these awful, awful things online and not have any karmic fallout?
The part that gets me, honestly, is motherfucker, your picture is in the profile.
His picture's in the profile.
Is in the profile. Listen, CNN came with the receipts.
No.
You know? It's like when Trump says he didn't say something that he didn't say, and there were like 40 cameras there, all recording it from different angles. Motherfucker, you said it. I don't know who's listening to you, who believes that you didn't say it, but we all know, and you know you said it. And this fool's trying to act like, I never said it, I never did it. Like, this is the same shit you say now. It's no different. Let me stop.
Okay, Stephen, let's move on to some other news that's just as awful as Mark Robinson. And in the same state, Republican Michelle Morrow, who is running for North Carolina School superintendent falsely claims that the plus in LGBTQ plus includes pedophilia. In a Monday evening post on X, formerly Twitter, Morrow wrote, Mo Green has stated that the Parental Bill of Rights does more harm than good. And he states he is proudly endorsed by Equality North Carolina, whose mission statement is to promote LGBTQ plus power. Newsflash, the plus includes pedophilia. Mo Green will not keep our kids safe. Morrow's controversial remarks come amid a political landscape where fellow Republican candidate Lt Governor Mark Robinson, currently running for governor of North Carolina, has also drawn heavy criticism for his extreme anti-LGBTQ plus news. I think it's also really important to note that this is part of Project 2025's framework in saying that LGBTQIA people's existence is part of pornography and indoctrination, and that they want to erase and criminalize that. So it's so disturbing.
What's so disturbing is that North Carolina has so many of these fucktards in the state running for public office. How can somebody who is into porn across the board, a person who's supposed to be upholding family values, the same person sexualizing people and creating impressions that we are grooming people, when in fact you are the ones doing the grooming? It's so disturbing as to be laughable.
That part, Stephen. They have their own internalized homophobia and transphobia that they have to deal with. And in doing so, work so hard to remove people from public life just because of their own shame.
Well, Lizette, we could talk about these fucktards all day, but we've got to get to our guest.
I cannot wait.
Christoph and Hazel Heinzer are the proud parents of two non-binary kids from Tucson, Arizona. They believe all kids deserve to be loved, valued, and affirmed, and to thrive as their full, authentic selves. As part of her advocacy, Hazel attended multiple committee hearings at the Arizona State Capitol to oppose anti-LGBTQ+ laws and testified this spring in the Arizona House Judiciary Committee hearing opposing SB 1628, a trans erasure bill. Earlier this year, Christoph participated in the Dads 2 retreat, accompanying 11 other fathers of gender expansive kids for a weekend fishing trip in Maine. Christoph has a BS in engineering and an MBA. He's a serial entrepreneur and has worked in solar for the past 15 years. Hazel has a BA in psychology and a master's in counseling with a background in community behavioral health and is a licensed marriage and family therapist. Christoph and Hazel strive to be the best parents and advocates they can be for their kids and have started to share their family stories to help change hearts and minds. Everyone, please welcome Hazel and Christoph Heinzer to our show.
Hi, everyone. And I just want to say welcome to the show, Hazel and Christoph. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having us. I'm excited and nervous because I'm a fan of the podcast. So to be here, I was telling Christoph that if we can be like half as articulate as some of your other guests, I'll feel good.
Don't even worry about it. We're just going to keep on this podcast. This is a space. It's a safe space, and there is no right answers. We are just here to have a conversation like we did this weekend. So you'll be fine.
So I wanted to start with, as you all know, in our opening today, we talked about just getting back from the Gender Liberation March in Washington, D.C. this past weekend, which is why we didn't have a podcast episode last week. Can you share with the audience a little bit about what your experience was like and how you felt about it?
I mean, I loved it. It was a fun excuse to go to DC, and it was the first march that I've been a part of, let alone a march in the Capitol. Actually, maybe it's the most memorable thing. I'm sure I've been part of like little minor things, and this was just a whole nother level.
For me, it was really exciting. It was so incredible to see everybody together. Just the energy was incredible, and especially to see our kid Dylan, seeing all of these people and being able to walk right alongside. I'm like already going to start tearing up. Just seeing Dylan get to walk alongside such incredible advocates was just really invigorating.
Yeah, I have to echo everything that you just said. But Christoph, you and I, we've had another experience, not quite as like large as a Gender Liberation March. You and I attended the second Dads fishing retreat, this time in Joe Mary Lake, Maine at Buckhorn Camps. Can you talk about what that experience was like for you? Because that was another first, I would imagine.
Yeah, that was a totally different first. That felt more like, gosh, I don't know how you describe it. You've got like sort of entry-level dad things in common with all the dads that you meet on the street. And I'm in sales, like I interact with all different types of people, all all day, every day. And you get that sort of second level question, which used to be a softball home run, like, hey, you got kids? And it used to be like, yeah, what ages? And then you'd go into detail, next level detail. The dad's retreat was probably the first time where that awkward sort of, I've got non-binary kids, or I've got gender non-conforming, fill in the blank, out of the ordinary conversation about your children. At the dad's retreat, everybody was like, had that experience shared. So yeah, that felt like a very sort of instantly close-knit community. Whereas the Gender Liberation March, I felt like it was that, but without any sort of specific definition, right? It was like where the dad's community came to the Latinx community, to the women's rights community, and it was like everybody was there, everybody was welcome. Yeah, I don't know, that's the best way I can articulate it.
So Hazel, I have a question for you, because I felt when I took my first trip, and this one was in Broken Bow, Oklahoma, and I met the dads that I met with, and we had the experience that we had, I came back a changed person. But I'm a single dad. I don't have a partner necessarily that could say, hey, Stephen, you were this way before, and now you're changed somehow. Did you notice a change in Christoph when he came back for meeting with all of us?
I would say that before he went, well, and he's always been on board in affirming our kids and being supportive and yeah, let's figure this out together. But I feel like after the trip, it just took him to another level of, okay, what can I do? How can I get involved? How can I make a difference? And then I think being connected to other dads, I feel like that was so great for you. I don't know. Yeah, just to feel like you're not alone. I don't know. Well, and this is kind of what I appreciated. And I don't know if you're gonna have to delete this out later, but Christoph always told this joke, like forever since I knew him, that was like sexist. And, it was the kind of joke he would tell like around a fire or, like not when kids are around. And I would always be like, oh, that's actually not really appropriate. And I understand that he brought out that joke on the dad's trip and was immediately informed that it was like sexist. And the dads were able to explain to him why it was not appropriate in a way that for whatever reason he was not able to hear from me before. So I feel like dads connecting with dads it's like going to help some dads like get to the next level of feeling uncomfortable or being able to look at themselves and some different biases that that we all have. So I appreciate
God, Hazel, I'm going to hire you to do a commercial, because that is the greatest endorsement I have ever heard for why it's important for dads of gender expansive kids to have community with one another, because sometimes you just can't hear those really important messages from people who you're just like, man, whatever, you're just my wife. Hey, you're just my girlfriend. Hey, you're just my partner. What do you know? But when a guy says it to you, for some reason, there's gravitas behind it, and or there's a way to make the information being shared relatable. So that's huge. I thank you for sharing that with us.
Yes. Well, and thank you, because now he's hopefully not going to tell that joke anymore.
Dare to dream.
I tell the example of that joke now as where, oh gosh, AC was there, but there's this concept of like your first voice and then the voice that comes out of your mouth. And I've always had a little bit of a filter problem. So just understanding like, hey, in the evolution of man, whether that be fatherhood or just all of us, like some of those things don't need to come out your mouth anymore.
I feel like that's really important for all of us. Those are really important lessons where we learn, where we feel that discomfort of where our gaps are, and then we get to like show up differently. And so I love that you shared that. We won't edit it out. I want to take this moment because I know your story, right? But the people listening to us are not going to know your story. And so I was wondering if you could take a little moment to kind of tell us who you are and who your family is and how you began this journey, this gender journey, as I call it, from parent, like learning to be supportive parents and then moving into advocacy. What has this journey been like for you?
Where do you want us to start? How far back?
Well, first tell us about who you are and your family and like how you got on this journey. And then, second part, why did you move into advocacy? Why was that important for you?
Okay. So
well, it all starts the same if you're making a non-binary baby. So that part was the fun part.
Christoph, did you not just tell us about
start...
the second voice? Did you not just tell us about the filter voice? Okay, so Hazel, can you start the
You
walk
see
down
her
memory
looking at
lane
me
for
like
us?
it's like I'm gonna kick this off.
So first of all, not everybody starts their like family in the same way. So we started our family in one way that some people do. Oh gosh, I don't know. So before kids, well, and I guess even after our first kid, I was in social work and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. And so in my training, we're taught that gender is fluid in a concept and, you know, to affirm kids, and kids do best when they're in supportive homes, all that stuff. And I used to work with kids and families. So I had a bunch of children's books about gender diversity, that kind of thing, that I always had around. And we read with the kids. But I, like, looking back, I realized we still gendered our kids raising them as they were growing up. And so Dylan, our oldest, when they were 7, and this is right when they're going back to school after the pandemic into 2nd grade, they just shared with me that they didn't feel like a girl or a boy, and or that I don't remember the exact wording, but basically they didn't feel like they fit in with the girls or the boys. And so I just said, oh, tell me more about that. Yeah, I was like, oh, do you feel like you have friends? And so, I mean, they felt like they had friends, that they were comfortable at school, but just that they didn't fit into either category. So I was like, okay, well, yes, that happens. Look, here's this book. Let's read it. And yeah, like some people use they, them pronouns. And so Dylan, like right away, when we read some of the book, they were like, yeah, that's me. And so I don't know, it was just like the right thing to do, I guess.
You allowed for the conversation and offered resources, right? Which I think is like where some of us, I can say I went wrong. Like Daniel didn't have the language, right? To truly kind of express who he was. Like for him, it was like trying to find words and then articulating them. And so I think that that's incredible that you were providing language early on to help your child figure out where they existed in the genderverse.
Yeah.
I feel like the world was evolving in that way, because that question we all hear of where did this come from? I don't think anyone could answer it. We didn't know if the language came from school. One of my favorite little hints, if you will, was the conversation with Dylan's pediatrician, where Dylan was like, I didn't have the language until I was 7, but I knew a couple years sooner. Yeah, to me, that was so powerful to just hear like this kid who also, right, tells me regularly, like, it's okay that you don't know what to do, Papa, just sit here and listen, right? Like this kid is like evolved to myself. And I know Stephen could say that doesn't mean much, but like being able to observe this child describe a past event and say, I didn't have the language then, when as I was observing it, it's like I'm learning the language and society's learning the language, and it's all happening at the same time. Whereas, I mean, when Daniel was going through it, I feel like I can't even imagine what it was like. The language practically didn't exist, I imagine.
Yeah, well, I mean, it was 2015, so there were resources coming out, right? Like it was considered like the trans tipping point. So when we had Laverne Cox on the cover of Time and Avery Jackson on National Geographic, like there was Jazz Jennings was on television, right? So like there was language, but I think with Daniel, it was like him trying to figure out. I remember he shared this story with me that like one of his classmates was like, so are you a boy or a girl? And Daniel was like, well, I'm a boy on the inside and I look like this on the outside. And then the classmate was like, oh, you're a tomboy. So like Daniel came home and was like, started telling everyone he was a tomboy, right? And so I think he was trying to find the word to communicate to us what he needed to. And so I think had we made an effort to put books in front of him where he could say, oh, there are other people like me, he wouldn't have had such a difficult time voicing what he was trying to say. So I think it's just great. Pat on the backs for y'all. Mm-hmm. I think.
Well, hold on, Chris. Let's not give him too many pats quite so. Because this is I think an antiseptic version of the experience for you all, because I know from my experience with Christoph on the trip that there were certain points on the journey where, you know, you really were questioning like what was happening with you, with your child, with your relationship with your child. Can you talk about some of the internal turmoils that you may have gone through? And I'm not here to really elevate the grief narrative, because that's not what we do you here. But it is important for parents to recognize that sometimes you don't know what's going on, and it's okay to not know what's going on as long as you course correct. And, having Hazel, I think, as a good counterbalance to you is very important. But I know that from our trip, there were certain points along the way where you were just like, what's happening? Can you talk to us a little bit about kind of your own struggles?
Oh man, what's happening? I mean, one, it's great to be partnered up with someone that you can lean on to sort of do that first level of diligence and guidance and trust and ask and follow. I mean, part of what's happening is overlaid on, you have in-laws and you have parents in the mix too. And we're trying to, transport our children across different states to different cousins to have different experiences. And then you overlay language. It sounds minor, but I have two immigrant parents, one who still sounds like he just arrived and basically said that his lack of ability to read and write and enunciate words is why he could only get to a certain place in his life, whatever. And then my mom's the exact opposite, where like every grammatical detail is, it's like you will never know that she's from another country. And so to have I think a 5-year-old, basically directing grandma, like, no, grandma, it's they, repeat after me, they, like, and then have your mom talk to you about how it's disrespectful for a child to direct an elder. There's those types of challenges. Then there's also just, I guess, on some level, early on, there's just the like, what's a regular dad? What is the definition of kind of this normal societal description of what being a dad is? So you wrestle with that a little bit, I imagine. I don't know. I kind of scattered a lot of thoughts out at once.
No, I think you're spot on. There's so many nuances in the relationships that we have and the people that we bring into the fold when it comes to sharing our children's gender identity, that navigating it is sometimes difficult. Like that part about language and having immigrant parents. I have immigrant parents. Lisette has immigrant parents. My mom told me, just because I'm in America, I don't have to do what Americans are doing as the explanation for why I should not be supporting my child. And it's just one of those things where it's just, you've got to find a way to try to get through to people, even though sometimes it's harder than it necessarily needs to be. So it sounds scattered, but it was kind of spot on.
I feel like one of the things I love about your guys' show is the joy part. And so what I do have to do is shout out to Nemo in Switzerland, who won the Eurovision. He's this they're this non-binary artist, and to see just getting that Switzerland gives the stamp of approval to this non-binary superstar, and seeing how that somehow trickles through my parents, right? They get the Switzerland magazine, they see Switzerland's on the world stage. Not that I noticed a difference. My parents had already evolved their thought quite a bit, but just on the global stage, seeing all of us evolve through the understanding.
Well, and then just to see how excited our kids were to see that representation of a Swiss non-binary person winning, and to see them on the cover of a magazine. So they, memorized the song right away. It was pretty fun. And I feel like part of our job as parents has been to serve as a filter for our kids, to kind of go ahead of them as far as setting boundaries with friends and family, and people that we bring around our kid, to say, okay, if you're going to be in our bubble, these are the expectations. And then I guess one of my ongoing challenges, I guess it'll be a challenge forever, is to just figure out, where do we put our time and energy to help change hearts and minds? I don't know. Where do you draw the line? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, no, that's really, really important. It's so funny because I ran across this post on Instagram, and I was telling Jose and Daniel about it, that it was it said something like you become 4 times more exhausted trying to convince someone to believe and think the way you do. And more times than not, the person you're trying to convince never does change their mind, or doesn't change their mind within that conversation. And so how to fight exhaustion. It was a post around conversations online where people are debating and arguing and talking about really important issues and feeling this divide, right? And so I think that that's something I'm constantly asking. Stephen's better about it, but Stephen's not as tired as I am. I'm like, well, Hazel, no, she's down here. I'm like, Hazel, I'm tired. I'm ready to like, I'm tired of trying to convince people to support their children and or support mine. And so I need to probably just recharge somewhere along the way. But it starts with family, right? Like, how is it that we cannot bring our family into the fold? And I think that for me, that was like fuel. Okay, I can't bring my family in, but I can share this experience in a way that it can't be ignored. And so my advocacy began on like Facebook, right? Like I'm too tired to explain to all our, the people around us. I'm just going to start sharing stories online and they can come with me or not. And so I think you are all kind of in this like similar space that I remember around trying to bring family along and educate them along and figuring out what your capacity is. And then also recognizing that there's like a larger narrative, right? Like a larger movement. My most favorite part of the Gender Lib March was Daniel came into the hotel after we went and looked at all the monuments. And Daniel's like, I'm going to teach Dylan about Bowie because Dylan doesn't know about Bowie yet. And I'm going to teach Dylan about like the ways in which they mentor each other and create friendship. I think is really lovely. I think those are those moments where even if we can't change our families' minds or strangers, our kids are able to provide space for each other. And I think that that's really lovely. But talk to us if you feel comfortable, like about family and navigating family. I know Christoph touched on that a little bit, but also like, how has that moved you into advocacy? Has it been fuel for you in the similar ways that it's been for Stephen and I?
Yeah. Well, I think I have been surprised, just as we share about our kids. And again, our kids' gender is just a tiny part of their identity. You know what I mean? It like should not be a big deal. But because of the political climate we're living in, it is a big deal. So I think, I don't remember if it was a conscious decision or not, but at some point, our kids asked us, because we always let them lead and would ask them, okay, do you want us to correct people? Who do you want us to tell? And they just don't care. They want to use they, them pronouns. So they want us to correct everyone. And we'll talk about how in different situations, if we're never going to see anyone again, it's not worth it. And they don't want us to tell like some random stranger on the street if it doesn't make sense. But when we just started, it wasn't a big deal. And just using they, them pronouns, I was surprised by how many people then were like, oh yeah, my kid, or, just sharing their own personal connection to somebody that they just hadn't shared before. And I think I've also been surprised. And a part of that is my own naivety, being naive, of when I've been surprised when people have not accepted and affirmed our kids. So that I think is something I'm still working through. And again, it's, I guess, that cognitive dissonance of.
I feel like, again, growing up in an immigrant family, it was, you have a private persona that is very much your family, and you have a public persona, which is you're kind of flying under the radar. We didn't have stickers on our cars. We didn't do anything loud. We didn't write, even with clothing, everything was sort of under the radar. And now, once I've understood how important it is for me to help normalize my children in society today, right now, the questions from my family are like, why are you guys flying those flags? Why are you guys putting those, like, what changed? You've changed. I was like, I have got to be a little bit more out there with all the things. I follow my kids' lead, right? My children are choosing to be leaders at a much younger age, and I'm being called to be a leader at a little bit of a later age. It's never been necessary until now.
Well, and I feel like it's us recognizing that we have the privilege to be visible, and how can we use that? Like, how can we tell our story to help change hearts and minds for people that don't have it, that it's not safe for them to be more visible. So I feel like that's, when you asked about our journey of becoming more active advocate, I think for the first period of time, it was more like us going inward, kind of, figuring out what our boundaries needed to be the best parents we could be for our kids. And now we're looking at, okay, now how do we make the world safer for everybody? Like, what can we do?
And that assimilation piece that we're taught by our immigrant parents is like, it worked for them, but it didn't create like freedom. It didn't allow us to exist fully in spaces, right? And I think what our kids are asking us is to break that generational trauma of like trying to assimilate and only getting so far. Well, if you're a person of color, right, you can only get so far. You can't fully assimilate. To say like, I want to exist fully in all spaces, right? And so thank you for sharing that, Christoph.
So it's interesting because, you said something that I'm reflecting on our weekend and I'm realizing is so true. You said you followed your kids' leads, and I'm picturing us in the march. And in the march, Dylan is holding the banner and they're in front of us all. Like, I have long legs and I'm trying to keep up with your kid who was literally, they had to ask us to like slow down so that we were ahead of the Gender Liberation March banner. But they were so intent on being at the front of the line, being at the front of the march, being visible, being seen. They had the cape. I was just like, wow, this child really has so much confidence and so much self-assuredness that you don't typically see in children that age. And I had to say something because it really did impress upon me the type of child that you're raising. They say the leaf doesn't fall too far from the tree. And I know Christoph had very little to do with it, and this is probably all Hazel. But because you're both part of this child, I have to give you both credit for raising a child that really is capable of expressing agency and saying for themselves who they are and what they want and advocating for themselves. That's not something you typically see in children. So I want to give you props, but I also want to ask you, where do you think that comes from?
Oh.
Where does stubbornness come from,
Yeah.
Stephen? Can you answer that question?
I'm a Taurus, so I'm a bull, so I know it's
Me
my
too.
zodiac sign. So
Yeah.
No, I mean, from early on, oh gosh, I don't know. No, I feel like we always worked on making sure our kids knew that they had a voice and that their voice mattered. And it was very much, for me, it relates to even just that, like, really the parenting of young kids, that like gentle parenting, attunement, like getting their consent before you do anything, even putting on a shirt, like, okay, I'm going to put the shirt on, or, just getting permission. That was just kind of our approach, making sure that our kids knew that they were in control of their body, that their voice mattered, and that we would give them choices when it was safe to do so, and if it, worked out. So
I just imagined one of the children like yelling like "my body, my choice" or something, and it was being super annoying, right? Like, you can't get a freaking car seat, child seat, like, you know what I mean? Like, you can't leave because you can't freaking buckle them in, and you're just like, oh, you son of, like
there was a
that,
time
like,
when
common anger that's like, just do what I think, like.
there was definitely a period of time where it was like, we need to get buckled in the car, and the kid was like, no means no, and I said no. we did it. It's our fault.
Not done yet. It's not done yet.
But again, I think you raise a really important point, and I don't want it to be lost, because I think people often think with parents of gender expansive kids, we're just bending over backwards and doing whatever our kids say, and we don't have any boundaries, and our kids dictate what happens, and not recognizing there's a distinction between permissive parenting, where within boundaries, you are giving your children agency. But in certain areas, they don't have any agency because you're a parent and you have the ability to see the future and to forecast in a way that the young developing brain of a small adolescent child does not. And so making decisions with your child and allowing your child to lead does not mean giving control of how they're being raised to them. Yeah. And so it's important that we establish this distinction, and we talk about the frustrations of, yeah, you can give your child agency, and sometimes that agency is a little too much when you're trying to get them strapped in a car seat and you're trying to leave. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that they're also going to school and having gender affirming surgeries and coming home a different gender. Like, that's just nonsense.
It's just a different form of parenting. Like, I went to a listening session. It was like an info session at Daniel's school because there's a new superintendent, and you could see the difference between like the parent, like one parent was like, my child cannot control themselves on the phone, right? And so all phones should be banned. And I was like, I feel like phones are a tool. Like, I've seen Daniel do homework on his phone in Google Meet. I think that you have to teach your children to be disciplined. Like, Daniel has put like time parameters, like you can put like the time markers on your phone to track how long you're on it. And I'm like, he's going to be a grown grown up and he has to learn how to like manage himself and his like and be disciplined in who he is. And so I think that that's where I agree with you all, that it's not permissive parenting. It's just understanding that your child is a person all their own outside of you, and being attuned to ask them how they're feeling and how they're doing, and not telling them who they are. Like, I don't know if y'all had this experience, but my dad was like, this is who you are. And I was like, but what if it's not? And, you know, and I feel like that's why there's so many stories around teen rebellion, because it was trying to break free from what your parents said you had to be and do. And our children are getting to define themselves and find themselves and explore who they are beyond their gender, right? Like, really, like, once they're affirmed, they're like, okay, I like music? Do I like sports, right? Your kid loves to climb. And so it's just like, you know, they get to focus on their skill sets as opposed to like pushing on their parents to see them fully, which I think is a beautiful way of parenting.
So, Hazel, living in Arizona, where LGBTQ plus rights are often debated, how have you found the broader community's response to your family, particularly considering Dylan's gender identity?
We are really fortunate that our kids are relatively insulated, like at their school and their extracurricular activities. They're in really affirming environments. And so it's not realistic for them to, you know, not become aware of all of the discrimination and the, you know, rhetoric forever. Dylan's definitely already aware of it.
I feel a little bit like I'm one of the people coming out of the fog, so to speak. So my observation, at least with family and friends, is like, oh, it's no big deal. Like, we love you and your family. And the politics of it almost seems to be like this noise in the background that people ignore, like they tend to do, and maybe they're uninformed about. Like, I will credit Lizette and Hazel with kind of making me see that a lot of the intention around politics and how it happens years in advance, and how there's these bills and how there's these agendas, like, it just all sounded like conspiracy theory stuff to me before, but I just wasn't paying attention. And now when you start to pay attention, it's, well, I'll say it the other way. I was, you know, jonesing for a compliment from my 6-year-old and asked Sierra, you know, something about why I'm a good papa. And they brought up that to protect me from the people that don't like trans kids. So like, who would ever think that a 6-year-old knows that there are people that don't like trans kids, and that is part of what being a papa is this day and age, right? Like, I would have never thought that would be an answer.
Yeah, I feel like that's when it goes back to us looking at where our actions can have the greatest impact, where we can spend our time and energy. And I feel like a part of that is us just like role modeling, affirming our kids, and, you know, reaching out to people when it might make a difference, and recognizing when it doesn't make, like, definitely should not debate the right for our kids to exist as they are. You know, we should not debate any trans person's right to exist as they are. So not falling into wasting energy having those conversations. I think that's where I feel like I need help next, in figuring out what can we do to have the greatest impact. You know what I mean?
Stephen, I want to say that I'm offended by one of these questions.
Have we already answered it, or is
No. I mean,
no?
I'm curious to know which one, because I
let me
gave
tell
you the
you
questions to review before we came on, and you didn't do nothing. So that's on you.
So one of Stephen's questions is, one of the things we talk a lot about on this podcast is the importance of support networks. Christoph, have you found a support network, whether that be in your school, local organizations, or online communities that have helped you and you, Hazel, and Dylan navigate this journey? I'll let you answer.
Time out. I want to know why you would be offended at a question that's a softball. That's be like, yeah, we found Lisette, and Lisette runs a support group. Like, I'm giving you your propers, and you sit here getting offended. Come on now. Okay.
I just thought you didn't know. I was like, how are we not friends, Stephen?
No.
How did you forget?
We are friends, and that was a softball question for you to get bigged up. Anywho, mute yourself, woman. Okay, Hazel, I'm going to stay with you for a minute.
Okay.
So I don't have to answer that.
Shush! This is a taped show. I can't have both voices going at the same time, damn you. Okay.
Filter.
So, Christoph, have you found support networks, whether through schools, local organizations, or online communities, that have helped both you and Dylan navigate their journey?
Yeah, I didn't even have to look. It just, it found me. It was through my love of fishing that I found a dad support group. Of course, I've got Lizette and Jose local to Tucson. Tucson, my wife and I almost don't think of it as a support group. We found like a new friend network. And I think of it as like the evolution of parenthood. So yeah, I don't think of it as a support network because that almost sounds negative or bad. Not that there's anything wrong with needing support. Yeah, I think we've been lucky. I kind of had it before I even knew I needed to look for it. But again,
I Googled it. I looked in to find a parent community, a parent group in Tucson, and came across Families Transform that Lizette runs. I guess I want to go to that word support because that's something Lizette and I have been talking about too. Again, with the language and meanings and different connotations that words have. And I think it's really critical for parents to get their own support, to take care of themselves in order to be the best parents they can so that their kids don't have to experience, whatever feelings their parents might have. The parents need to deal with that outside of the kids. So I feel like the parent community we found allows us that space to learn from other parents and, to ask questions. And so I feel like that's where we get a lot of the support that we need and connected with different people. And then the kids will get together and they'll just play. Like they don't need anything. They're just kids. They just want to go have fun and play. So it's like us parents that need to work out our stuff so that we can, regulate ourselves and, set boundaries with the people around us so that our kids can be safe and navigate this world.
I just want to say that Christoph always brings the tears and some sweet insights and can speak Spanish, which has been helpful in certain, I know. And Hazel and Christoph have never really missed a meeting. I think they've missed like 2. And when they've missed either of those 2 meetings, everyone's like, where are they? And I'm like, I know, we can feel that they're not here. And Hazel has helped so much with like the legislative stuff. It's hard to find families who are willing to go and be in a hostile environment and be so openly and with so much love, knowing that it's going to be broadcasted and archived on our state website. So I'm always super grateful to them both. But I had to tease y'all. I had to tease Stephen because I was like, does he forget that I run a group?
Forget. Like the only reason that I even tolerate Christoph is because Jose said he was harmless. Jose vouched for this dude. And so I was like, okay, before I came on the trip, Lizette vouched for this dude. She was like, he's harmless. Don't even worry about him. And there's this half-naked man coming through the woods. I'm like, what is happening? It's just
I was like, just redirect him. He'll be fine. He learns quickly. I really want to ask this question. This one is really important, I think, for whoever wants to answer it. But what are your hopes for Dylan's future, particularly when it comes to living authentically and finding acceptance as they grow?
I feel like they're already living authentically. So my goal is for them to continue to find places where they can be safe, continuing to live authentically.
I like the way they choose to live fearlessly. And they seem to be like, I look at my own struggles and you see some of those struggles manifested in your children. And so it's kind of like we get the privilege to be able to watch how they grow. And I want them to, make the most of their time, whatever that means.
Well, and I hope that they continue to use their voice and find their voice even more to speak up when they need things and really learn to advocate for themselves also, because we'll always be there for our kids and we can't follow them around everywhere forever. So
that's great. So we're at the end of our time, but I have one final question for the both of you. And Hazel, we'll start with you because I know we'll get the more coherent answer from you if we start with you. If you could share one piece of advice with other parents who are just learning about their child's non-binary or gender expansive identity, what would that be?
Well, these are Dylan's words. So a couple weeks ago, Dylan told me, Mama, it's okay if you don't always know what to do. You just need to be there with me. So I know I always cry. So I think it's just being there for your kids. Listen to, believe, trust your kids to know who they are and let them share that with the world when, how, and if they want to, and just be there with them.
Christoph?
I'd say try to stay open-minded about the gifts that your children have, because a lot of us might be trying to direct our kids in what we think they should be doing in the directions they should be going. And if instead you look at it as like this beautiful beautiful uncovered gift that you're just barely starting to like scratch the surface of. It's a little more fun, I think. Definitely don't think there's anything wrong with your kid. Realize that your kid is super special and try to find that.
Oh my goodness. I have all the feels right now. You two are like getting up there in like my favorite people ranking. Like, let's be clear. I am so honored that you agreed to join us today. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I can't wait for us to get it out because the world needs to hear from y'all.
Well, thank you all for everything you and Lizette are doing. We are big fans and love you both to pieces.
I love you guys. You always bring all the sweet moments that we all need. Thank you.
I'll keep working on that second voice so I don't offend any more people.
I believe in you, Christoph. I believe in you. I'm always rooting for you. Clear eyes, full heart.
All right.
Now it's time for a recurring segment, Allies and Assholes, where we highlight individuals or groups that are supporting the LGBTQIA community on the one hand and call out straight up assholes who are trying to move us all backwards on the other. Lizette, who are we talking about today?
Our ally of the week is Governor Andy Beshear. Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear is the ally of the week for signing an executive order banning the harmful practice of conversion therapy for minors in his state. Despite repeated failures to pass similar legislation in the Republican-dominated legislature, Beshear took bold action to protect LGBTQ youth, stating that conversion therapy has no medical or scientific basis and increases rates of suicide and depression. Beshear's leadership affirms that LGBTQ plus children in Kentucky are valued and deserve to grow up free from abusive practices aimed at changing their identity.
I love this week's ally specifically because when you can't do it through legislative action, when you have people who are just mucking up the wheels of our government to prevent people from living full and complete lives, he took executive action to ensure that it was possible. And so more governors of states in which Republican dominated legislatures are preventing real work from being done should follow his lead.
And this is why Governor Andy Beshear is our ally of the week.
Okay, congratulations to Governor Beshear. Now on to our asshole of the week. Our asshole of the week is, no surprise, once again, Donald Trump. In last week's debate with Madam Vice President Kamala Harris, Trump took to his favorite lines of attack, immigrants and trans people, tying them together by suggesting that Kamala Harris wanted to give transgender immigrant inmates gender reassignment surgeries in prison. Trump's attack went to a 2019 response Kamala Harris gave in which she affirmed her support for inmates receiving appropriate medical care in custody, including gender-affirming care for transgender inmates. Trump and the Republicans somehow think that providing medical care for inmates, regardless of gender identity, is somehow part of Kamala Harris's liberal agenda, as opposed to something that is constitutionally required.
And that's that important bit, is that it's already constitutionally required to allow inmates, regardless of legal status, care, all care, gender-affirming care, is medical care that is necessary and like any other care being received.
And this is why former president and current felon Donald Trump is our asshole of the week. Well, that's our show for today, folks. I want to thank today's guests, Hazel Christoph Heinzer, for joining us today. And of course, I got to give it up to my Gender Liberation March co-host, Lizette Stephen, for holding it down once again.
Stephen, I'm just not over this last weekend at the BLM March. So, yay, I'm so glad I got to see you. So, thank you, Stephen, for always holding it down when it comes to the podcast and all other places where you make the world a little bit better for families like my own. And thank you, all of our listeners. We couldn't do this without you. So, thank you for tuning in to the Parent Advocate Podcast.
And folks, please be sure to subscribe to our podcast and YouTube channel, follow us on Instagram and TikTok, and do whatever you've got to do to stay up to date with everything going on here at the Parent Advocate Podcast. Goodbye.
Goodbye.